And I'll briefly give the panelists opportunity to introduce themselves. Let's start with Peter.
Peter Guilfoyle with Northwest Analytics.
Hi, Brian Crandall, analytics engineer with Seek. Was the one who actually had the pleasure of working with Zach on a lot of what he presented. And excited to be up here with the panel on the front lines of yeah, I'm excited to be up here on the panel with the front lines of folks who are doing digital transformation here. So thanks for having me.
I guess I'll stand up because it's hard to see behind here.
You can go to the mic.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Nick Peterson. I'm a chemical engineer working with Trendminer. Before this, I was a process engineer working in a plant, working on a lot of capital projects, troubleshooting processes, dealing with outdated digital systems, trying to capture results and gain ROI without necessarily having the right tools available to me. So one of the main reasons I came to Trendminer is to try to drive the industry forward, to give the engineers the tools they need to do their job.
Thanks, folks. So I'll try to change the rules a little bit and give everyone the opportunity to ask questions, not only our public, but also our panelists. So we can create a little bit of a dynamic. To start with, are there any questions from the audience? There is a gentleman.
Identify yourself. Hi, Mike Strobel with Aspen Tech. I was interested in something that Doug mentioned in the very first presentation, that they saw an improvement just in talking about implementing. And I was wondering if y'all figured out what's behind that, and if you could save a lot of money without implementing just by talking about it. And one other thing, I live about a half a mile away from that "this way, that way" sign. That's in Lake Jackson, Texas.
Yeah, that's a great way to figure out which way to go, right? This way or that way. It's a real sign. So I'm glad I got validation on that one. You know, a lot of it is just the psychology of operators knowing and understanding that a given parameter is important to other people and to the process itself. And so they naturally will start to pay more attention to it. And monitor it a little bit more closely than they would. It's a really interesting kind of psychological effect that you do have. But in addition to that, I would say it defaulted to our procedures as well, where we gave a range and not a target. And that was a failure on a management side of things, where we should have made our procedures more specific and exact so that everybody knew exactly what to aim for. And that was a good first step for us as part of our continuous improvement.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Doug. So this is a fact of life, that if you change the conversation, you change the behavior. So you can just keep that in mind. It will always work. So giving the right topic to discuss will also focus the organization in the way you choose. Next question. No direct questions. I have a question for Jasper. How does the organization support the initiative, and how?
So the organization, well, the organization in itself is of course very wide, so that's a very wide question. I think
management, organizational structures.
Yeah, so we have two things. We have the top down, where the management has set the objective to develop a strategy to work with analytics. So they give the opportunity to work on it. But I think that what's also very important is that the bottom-up approach is very important. Young people come in, and but also all the people, they're enthusiastic, creative about doing new stuff, and it's about making sure you tap into that energy, in that potential, and it's not always where you expect it to be. Sometimes it's the nearly retired operator, and you would expect a young one, and vice versa. So be very creative in how to approach your people.
And open to the good surprises.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. There's a question from Mike Dudzik, ArcelorMittal.
Yes, from the topic analytics rollouts, best practices for the companies that presented, obviously you had to have very good partners, and these are three great companies there. But I guess from your company's perspective, did you have a specific process? How did you choose from so many analytics company, those particular ones? Obviously three good ones, but was there a specific process? Did recommendation? What was kind of, how did you decide on who you chose?
So that's for the three speakers.
So it's a very good question because, as we usually say, it's a big zoo out there with lots and lots of tools. So yeah, it's not easy. How do you do it? You go to meetings like these, you see presentations, you talk to people, and then what I usually try to do is there real new value? Are we trying to do something which another company does already, or is something new? And if there is a chemistry, I still call it, and you have done also the proper checklist, then if we see value, we say let's do a quick trial. But yeah, be careful because something which you start as a trial, if you're not managing it, can grow into something which is still there but nobody really managing. So it's not easy, but we're trying to find out how to improve.
Yeah, basically the same, looking at all the options out there, going to conferences, seeing what was available. The list was somewhat narrowed down when it got to me. We started reviewing, and to us it was, what works best and what's going to give us that rate of return immediately. So it's very similar to what was done there.
For myself and Air Liquide Advanced Materials, it was taking a look at what our user requirements list was. So that included things, oftentimes you would get things that would be out of the box. We had very little customization that we needed to do, some configuration. But I would say one of the features that we were looking for that checked the box was not only would it recognize the fact that you would have an SPC rule violation, but it would allow us to record the action that was taken and the cause. And for us, that was very valuable because those could be then collected, aggregated, given to an engineer and say, okay, here's an opportunity for you. We've had these rule violations. Here's the reasons. What can we do to engineer a change and improve our position?
So if I could.
Please.
One of the questions that I think probably all the vendors get is which analytics, which then will narrow your choice of which companies provide those. And in talking with customers, prospects in the market, you quickly find out that analytics is not an either-or decision. It's not I'm going to do this or that. It's usually an and equation. So getting started is important, and picking the right analytics approach for the problem that you're trying to solve is critical, but understanding that it's probably not going to be the only analytics approach that you employ if you build up a robust analytics culture internally. And so several of our customers, Dow being the largest, they've started with us kind of on a foundational aspect, but they're continually looking to add analytics capabilities, on top of what they do with our solution. We're not the end-all be-all of analytics, never will be. There are too many good companies up here, others like Falconry in the audience that provide great analytics approaches that solve, fairly gnarly problems, for any customer.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
And from our side, from the vendor side, I work with a lot of you guys and give demos. One thing I would ask all of you guys to do actually is to know the guts of what you're asking about, right? So it's really easy to be general about this stuff, right? Now I want machine learning. What do you want? What are you looking for? What KPIs do you want to drive? What type of use cases do you solve? Because you can solve $1 million use case with Microsoft Paint, by doing some extrapolations. So if you don't ask those questions and get into the guts of the solutions that you're looking at, then it makes us harder to communicate with you as well. So getting educated is a big thing that would help on our side as well. And I guess,
Yeah, I'll chime in here. It's a very relevant topic. And the only thing that I'll add around the edges is when you pick something like something kind of tangible. Like Nick was saying, like even if it's a use case, it's a problem. Maybe you've already solved it in a way, but if you can evaluate these tools, and again, maybe multiple tools. It's an ecosystem out there, and use that and help that inform your decision. And you'll see right away when you start working with some of these new technologies and combine them and see how they complement each other, you'll have a solution worth spreading.
So that's probably a little bit more practical way of looking at things, looking at POCs and see what you can achieve and experimenting. That's one way. I think Doug's way is also a good one, which is more, taking a little bit more distance and doing specifications, brainstorming, and what do I exactly want, and then start comparing with the features that you find out there. So probably both are useful. Anyone from the audience? Not yet? Okay. Zach, you had a very clear asset performance benefits, you had financial benefits. Is there anything from the organization, any social benefits? You spoke about teams, but can you elaborate a little bit on how that worked in those teams?
Well, I mean, just from my personal experience, it's enabled me to have the conversation with, people across the entire asset. And I say the asset, I think we're somewhere around 3,000 employees with Pioneer. So I went from our corporate office down to Midland, Texas, the Permian Basin, and, enabling me to get in a room, have a conversation, it definitely made it easier to have that social interaction and understand the process as well. I've been exposed to multiple gas gathering systems and operations, and it definitely made it easier to have that conversation and get to meet people out there.
So it facilitated the conversation.
Yes, sir.
Right. We have a few minutes left. We have actually maybe 1 minute left. Let's have a look. Alan, can you put up the slide with the discussion points? Maybe in the back? If that's... Right, okay, never mind, not a problem. How do we make sure that best practices get shared and sustainably used and implemented? I think in the first wave you get some enthusiasm, people start using stuff. How do you make sure that you continue to be consistent about that? Similar to the chemicals need to be consistent, behavior needs to be consistent as well. Any comments on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, number one is having a strong feedback loop. So being able to have a feedback loop, right? You might set out a plan, you might set out a strategy, but things aren't always going to go the way that you want it to go. So you need to have somebody in management that's championing it, but you also have to have a really strong feedback loop from the users that are actually using the software or using the pilot you're doing. Because a lot of times what we see is in less successful rollouts, it's a really top-down approach, and the feedback loop never goes from the user to management and then back to the vendor, whoever you're working with, even if it's an internal project. I've seen that happen as well, right?
Right, and the key is there, not only get feedback, but act on the feedback.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I like the term feedback and being able to hear continuous improvement. When you get something successful, it's not going to be that way. We had a quick win with analyzing some compressors and we're able to evaluate which ones might need to be maintained. But if as the compressor ages, as things change, that the whole model changes, the analytics you did. So you need to be able to get right back in and collaborate in a fast way. So I think that's a good way to say it. Quick feedback, keep improving.
Improving management process. Anyone else?
I think the successful analytics implementation implementations include that as part of how they get started. So they involve people not from singular roles, but across roles, because you get amazing contributions from the most unexpected places sometimes. So having them involved and understanding that their inputs are valued and providing them the opportunity to influence and impact the outcomes, if you do that up front, then that becomes a normal course of action for them throughout, and it hits that sustainability curve where it's just part of business. It's just part of how I get my job done.
Becomes automatic, becomes normal.
Yep,
Right.
and that is, you have to hit that threshold with any technology implementation beyond just analytics to have it be successful long term.
Thank you. Anything from the presenters? Jasper?
Well, maybe to add to what Peter just said, one of the tools we are implementing is what you call process confirmation, and that's that you go in with people and that you actually do a quick check on, well, you said we're going to work with this tool. Are we actually using it, and how are we using it? And that you use that tool to start up conversations with people, and that you also make sure that you track these process confirmation checklists such that you can see how it develops. And that's an organizational way to keep it sustainable.
Thank you. Zach? No comment? Doug?
So the one advice that I would have on that from a sustainability standpoint is to keep the momentum rolling. Find that quick win, find the early adopters, make sure that they are recognized within the organization, and really make sure to PR the heck out of it, right? They did a great job. Let's make sure that they're recognized and show the value, and it will catch on within the rest of the organization.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I will say one quick thing.
Yeah, you say one quick thing, please. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess the hardest part is just embracing the change and trying to, understand how fast we have to evolve as companies and different, operations as this progresses. So on a daily basis, just, embracing that change is one of the biggest challenges.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the panelists, thanks to the speakers, thanks to you, audience. Thank you very much. We have been keeping you a little bit more. Don't forget to rate the session, please, in your app. And I hope you go home with a few insights on rollouts. And we'll keep writing about this. We'll keep collecting best practices. So you will hear from us. Thank you very much.